Before this class, I didn't have that much of knowledge about the courts, but after, I learned that the judges have a really big role in the courts.
I learned a lot about how the U.S. Constitution is open to interpretation, but the judge's decision is how they interpret the law.
This project made me realize that judges and juries, they have a complicated job, that sometimes the arguments on both sides, they're extremely, articulate, and they both make sense, and it's hard to choose what verdict should stand.
We're going to spend the majority of our class with the hard work that you did to start thinking about the answers to the questions that you chose about the lemon slave case. So everyone's going to listen, and you can take notes while you're listening, and then I'm going to give everyone about 1 minute to jot down some other things.
Before this class, I didn't know anything about the lemon slave case. It's actually the first time I've ever heard of it.
A family named the Lemons were moving from Virginia to Texas, but they were moving throughout New York.
When they stopped in New York is a free state, therefore they don't have any slaves. But the Lemon family has 8 slaves.
And it was a debate about whether the slaves should be freed or kept enslaved.
Two different sides saw one law as in two different ways.
The judge had to see whether the slave should be freed or not because of the laws of New York State.
How do we understand this court case in juxtaposition to the Dred Scott decision, which happens through the Supreme Court? By the end of these court cases, what becomes really inevitable in the country, there are no compromises to be made about slavery.
This case led up to the Civil War. Many newspapers during the 1850s, they were arguing about how the North would agree with the judge's answer, but the South wouldn't.
America was very divided in its beliefs. One side believed that slavery was necessary, and another side was just completely against it.
The Supreme Court and the government had basically just avoided the whole question for so long, realizing that there was this imminent conflict of our country will be divided at one point on whether or not slavery should exist or not.
I don't think they quite were able, before this case, to see the role of the courts, to see what it means to question constitutional law, to fight for an implementation of state law that's about slavery. What for them was the most powerful is understanding when you're building an argument, what does that look like?
The arguments are two different ways to take the Constitution and different laws, and a judge's job is to interpret the law.
Constitution is a living document that is always being changed, and with this case, the judges look back on the previous court cases called legal precedents.
During one case, if a judge interprets it the same way, that sort of becomes the interpretation overall.
And they really got so interested in constitutional law. They wanted to really understand, well, what on earth would the Founding Fathers have meant when they wrote this kind of privileges and immunities clause? Everyone in the class had their own interpretation of what that particular piece of the Constitution was. I've never in my life had students say, can we look at the Constitution again? And they wanted to, because they really wanted to understand how both sides were using the Constitution to make an argument for different reasons.
I wrote that Culver's argument is stronger than Landgraf's argument. Culver uses 4 grounds to explain why the slave should be.
What's very interesting and fun in this class is looking at primary source documents and analyzing them.
We would analyze the document, which was just exactly the lawyer's arguments, the exact words they said it.
This is the actual documentation of the court case and what happened and how it happened, and the different appeals and different levels of the court system that it went through.
I found that your argument was very strong. I just feel like the first sentence, it can be a bit too vague, so you can combine the first and second sentence. I think the most challenging aspect was really interpreting the laws in our own minds, because the lawyers are explaining the laws, but you still want to really try to interpret it on your own. What does it mean to you?
Slavery is an immoral practice, but looking at the laws of the 1850s, I'm not sure that using both of those arguments that we got in the case, I'm not sure which way I would have gone if I were the judge.
The most challenging aspect of this class was interpreting the case myself and how I believed it should have been decided and what my beliefs and my interpretations were of the law.
My favorite part of this class is being able to discuss with my classmates and look at their views and different ideas of what they think about this document and what they think the outcome should have been